But we're going to go ahead and kick this off, guys. A lot of you guys know I'm Tim Ross, formerly president of Mud Lake Mail, currently president of Upswell. Name change, same great people, just offering some additional services. I was fortunate enough to bring on my old pal and partners, Greg and Sherri Sands, co-founders of Mud Lake Mail. A lot of you guys know those guys. They own shops all over the country. I thought today, Greg and I had some talk recently, and it was really important, guys, that we were able to share. You know, as an auto repair industry, I think it's critical that we help each other out. This is a tough time. You guys are essential service. This is the time to put the competitiveness aside, understand how we can help you guys, how you guys can help your community. And so I thought this, what better way for us to spend some time kind of talking about how we're able to manage your auto repair business in this downturn economy. So Greg, thank you very much for coming on board. Thank you for Sherri coming on board, and hope everything's going well for you right now.
Yeah, it's going really well. I mean, probably not a lot different than other people. I'm stuck at home, but all of our shops are open, and you know, not that busy. I think you know, that's part of what you see everywhere. Some states are different than others, but it just is. And individual stores, there's some good individual stores, but they're just really that's the exception, not the rule.
Well, today I thought we could cover, we're going to go ahead and kind of kick off. And guys, as I go through the presentation, hopefully you guys can see me and Greg. We're here live. Everybody else I've got on mute, so you'll hear Greg and I. There's an opportunity for you guys to ask questions. If you guys could go into the question chat box and kind of type in your questions. We've got my marketing manager sitting right on as well. She's muted, but she'll help me out if we have some issues here. But I want to keep this kind of covered some key points, but the key is for you guys to also have an opportunity to ask some questions. Over the last couple of weeks, I have had the pleasure to talk with a lot of people who I consider my friends, not just my customers, asking some really great questions, providing some really great insights. And so that's kind of what helped trigger this. And Greg's willingness to help is always appreciated. And so let's go to the next slide and we'll get this kicked off. Again, everybody's on mute. If you have some questions, you can type those in to the far right, and I'll be happy to kind of go through these. Hopefully you guys can hear. I know that I got a couple of questions. Sydney, someone's frozen on their end and there was no sound. Guys, make sure you guys have unmuted. I'm sorry, you've got your speakers on. And dial through the computer. If not, you can always sign off and sign back on, and you can try to get on that way, all right? So let's kick it off, Greg. Some of the things I know that's going on in this economy right now that's impacting the auto industry, there's a lot of uncertainty, there's a lot of fear, unemployment, what's going on with the future. I mean, give us what you kind of that 20,000-foot view of kind of where you feel like, you know, the economy was booming. I know you and I talked, the shops were doing incredible, record sales. You know, it's hard to find technicians, hard to find good people, you know, just everybody's on a tear. Then all of a sudden, screeching halt last 3 or 4 weeks. Now, a lot of uncertainty again, fear, people having to get laid off and furloughed, the future. I mean, what are your thoughts, 20,000-foot view?
Well, I mean, I think we have experienced the same thing where, you know, you have this virus out there that, no one knows how dangerous it is, and every few days you're being told there's a different way to spread it, and you start to have friends, co-workers, people that get it, and you hear really bad horror stories. And so, you know, it's important to know that prior to this, the economy was booming. This wasn't created by the economy, it was the other way around. I'm not sure even now. You know, if you think about it, you know, even in the United States, we still don't know what the denominator is. We don't know what the percentage of people that get it, that die from it, which is what we're all worried about. You know, but as they're getting closer to figuring that out, they're finding out that maybe it's not as deadly, still make you really sick. And unless you have underlying issues, you're probably going to get well. We've had people that we know that have had it, that have gotten well, or that are currently getting well. We've heard more extreme stories. So I don't think you're going to get an economy that's going to be totally back until there is more data and that maybe there's a vaccine. But that doesn't mean that our part of the economy won't be back. And I think that's what's important is if I had to bet money, we knew that April was going to be bad, and we prepared. Mm-hmm. We knew it was going to be horrible, and it is. We're in the middle of it. This is probably the worst of it, I think, for our industry. I think there's a possibility it could drag into a little bit of May, but I think that probably what you've experienced the last couple of weeks with all the fear and uncertainty, that people are getting used to this. Mm-hmm. And ahead of us is going to be where people go, hey, I'm ready to get out. And, if you think about auto repair, the cool thing about auto repair is, one, car repair never goes away. It may get delayed like it is this month, but people need their cars, and right now they have learned more than ever that they need a car. Probably in our favor too is that they're finding out that debt is not the greatest thing in the world. So going out and buying a $70,000 car probably doesn't sound very good. Just like maybe flying on an airplane doesn't sound great to people. If you polled everybody who's going to go fly somewhere the second half of this year, you'd get very little hands being raised. Well, that means miles driven in used cars. So when you think of, that's the way I kind of view the world, is if you think about, or the United States, if you think about our business, we do well when there's a lot of miles being driven each day on the road. So let's say there's, 100 million miles being driven, every month. And now there may be 5,000 miles, being driven. And so everything has just stopped. And also people have been furloughed and unemployment is backed up. So if you look at this, a lot of the fear and uncertainty is because people are afraid they don't have any money. But this tidal wave of stimulus that is coming our way, and it's a tidal wave, it is going to be I believe, it's only my own opinion, but I think people are surviving right now. The stimulus checks aren't out yet. The tax cuts, not the tax cuts, the PPL with Sherri, or PPP that Sherri will speak about, that's not out. Nobody's got any stimulus yet. So that's gonna, when you have a killer virus and no money and uncertainty, millions of people being unemployed, it's you can see why there's fear and uncertainty. But I can tell you, I feel really good about our industry, and not just I wake up one day and feel good. When you see what's going on out there, I feel like we are definitely in the thick of it right now. I think the worst of it.
It's funny you say that. I got a report sent to me by one of my friends that's from the United States Travel Association. And on that, it talked about people flying in airplanes and traveling and cruise. I hate to be in the cruise business right now. Tough times. But some of the key points it mentioned in there is that people are not looking to go travel on boats, on planes. They are looking to travel more in cars. Cars are more isolated to themselves. And so the idea of people utilizing their cars more often is extraordinarily high, especially throughout the rest of the year. And then again, like you said, coupled with costs, people are not going to trade in their cars. I had a call with another guy. He was telling me about a rental car company, one of the large rental car companies that has hundreds of thousands of unrented cars. So I mean, there is just going to be a need, I think, for people to drive their own car. They're going to keep their own car, and all that would bode well for us in this industry. You agree?
It's I think it bodes better for us. You know, we started a company the last recession. I think you and I started a company in the last
Yep.
recession.
That's right.
And, you know, I would tell our good friends on this webinar, which, by the way, I miss a lot of you guys, not all of you, some of you. But this is the time to be, instead of being afraid, it's really a good time to think about growing your business. This is not going to be normal. This is, when you look at these sales this month, you got to know that that's not, I don't know, there's 350 million used cars on the road, and they're going to need repaired. Now, there's going to be people that go out of business, but they didn't have to. Nobody on this call has to go out of business. There's going to be so much help out there. And if you're smart and if you think, you're going to get through the next 6 or 8 weeks. And when that happens, I think you're going to see sales in May be better than April. Won't be back to normal, but June will be significantly better than May, and July will get better. So I think our business will jump up there quicker. I'm kind of rambling, so maybe I lost your question now.
No, but that's, I think the biggest thing is that I think you did a great job of talking about is that as owners, guys, we just have to know that you're in a great industry. This thing is going to take off. The dam is going to break, and the people are coming back. I hear Greg say that all the time. That was a really great point. Car repair doesn't go away. See, unfortunately, like with the travel industry, like if you booked a flight or a trip or a casino, it's going to be hard because of scheduling. But if you got car repair problems, that just doesn't go away. It's kind of like a bum tooth, man. If your tooth hurts, you're going to get it fixed. You may not be able to get it fixed now, but in a couple of weeks, a month, you're going to get it fixed. So that's the great thing about auto repair. So let's go on then as we move on to the next slide, Sydney. So Greg, a couple of things I want to talk about. How do we position the company for success? I kind of listed some things here about operational changes. You know, I've heard a lot of people talk about, you know, are there some short-term changes, long-term changes? Short-term is a lot of owners, they cut their hours a little bit, and so it's allowed them to kind of reduce their costs. Some of their employees have actually taken a little bit less money because they're working less hours, they're hourly employees. They've changed a lot of their daily routines. They've done what you've taught for years, doing customer callbacks, being a little bit more diligent about that. Added new benefits. I kind of mentioned it down there. I think those concierge type services, those no contact type services. So talk a little bit about, in your mind, maybe some changes you've made operationally at your locations. I know you talk with hundreds of shops all over the country. You work with, I mean, you talk with some of the most successful business owners in Atlanta, in the area with your Tiger Group. Talk to us about operational changes that maybe make sense or people could consider doing.
Yeah, I mean, all the things you list right there, we're doing, and I think they're really valuable. We cut our hours back too, because we had to furlough some people. And our goal was that we knew April was going to be bad. And so when we furloughed somebody, we told them we want you back first week of May. So our strategy is don't blow a bunch of cash in April and get ready for trying to get things back to normal come May. So that's our overall strategy right now. The part of what you should be doing though is this is a good time to really look at your costs, your overhead. So if you have, I don't know, can you hear that?
No.
Can you hear that noise, or can you hear me okay?
I can hear you.
Okay. But part of what you should do, like I will give you a couple of things that I think are home runs. You know, this is a time to get your costs down. You know, from working with me, there's two ways to run a business. You always drive sales and you cut your costs. Well, there are a million ways to cut your costs. Some of the easy, probably the lowest hanging fruit is what has been another crisis in our country. It's been oil has collapsed. How many people on this call has renegotiated their oil price? Oh, sorry, big gust of wind.
That's all right. Hey, we're on the improv, but so, you're right. Oil's dropped tremendously.
We have gotten our price reduced to levels that I haven't seen in 20 years.
Wow.
So all we had to do was ask. I saw a deal with Aaron Clemens sent something out. You know, Aaron's really good operator in Augusta.
Mm-hmm.
And he caught one that I didn't even think about, which is renegotiating your workers' comp. You know, if you don't have as many hours, many people, you should, if you're paying workers' comp monthly, renegotiate that. I mean, obviously, if you haven't renegotiated your rent, that's insane. You know, we've renegotiated with almost every single landlord that we have. And guess what? Everybody wanted to do business with us. They didn't,
Yeah.
you know, it's not our fault that this thing happened. So they would rather work with us than have to start over with somebody else. So we went to all of our landlords. I'm a landlord. Between myself and a partner of mine, we have 10 locations that are, and we're giving away some free rent. Because you may go, well, I own my property, so how's that going to help me? Well, go to the bank, ask the bank that, you know, if they will defer 3 or 4 months of payments, they'll do it. You know, on the personal side, you know, we've sent out information to our employees about how you can get some relief on your own mortgage payments up to 8 months. You should, every single thing that you can do as an operator that will preserve your cash, you're crazy as hell not to do it. You shouldn't, this is your money. I mean, you're going to have to pay it back through taxes or whatever. So, or you're going to pay on the back end of the lease. I mean, there's nothing better than getting 3 free months of rent that's put on the back end of the lease that 15 years from now, you'll have to pay. So we just negotiated with everybody.
Yeah, you know, it's funny. That's been a reoccurring theme too, is, you know, renegotiating all your costs with all your vendors. But then also a lot of your employees are willing to step up and, you know, make some changes. A lot of them have been with people for 15, 20, 30 years. It's amazing what you can do when you ask. Let's go on to the next slide. And I want to talk a little bit about staffing changes. This is kind of one that it's kind of a hard one, right? It's a big pill to swallow on this one. This is tough. A lot of owners, as you know, it's emotional, it's challenging. You're trying to make changes to preserve the golden goose, but yet you don't want to make changes to the point where it hurts your company. And so you got to be able to figure out, how do you snap back? So who do I keep? Who do I furlough? Who do I ask to take pay cuts? I mean, these are a lot of questions of that I get all the time. And really one of the big ones is, if you can touch on some of this, what do you do with technicians? So hard to find them a few months ago. Man, do you pay out of your own pocket? I mean, a lot of things that you could think about on this one. So tell us a little bit about kind of your staffing concepts and thoughts, and touch on maybe some of the issues you see on this slide.
Well, we've reduced our hours. So we don't have one size fits all, and I wouldn't tell you that my way is the right way. It just works for different partnerships. The way that we operate is we invest in operators around the country. It's they're the operator, and so we have different. Can you tell me? Yeah. We have different we have different situations. We have a one-store operator that down in Daytona, and oh, sorry.
That's okay.
Sherry people that time. But some of the so in Daytona, a one-store operator, he's able to keep his whole staff. And what he's done is he's had some of his people work part-time. His two assistant managers work part-time. His sales are down about 30%. But he's elected that, look, I can't afford to have any of my people leave, because when this thing comes back, you know, I got to have them. He's in one of the worst markets for this type of thing. His customers are seniors. You know, they shouldn't be out. And he's done quite well through this. He's been damaged Justin, but he's been probably damaged, at least because he has such a great reputation there. Then we have other markets where we've furloughed some of the managers. Some people we've asked. We haven't furloughed, I don't think we furloughed anyone that didn't want to. We just asked for volunteers. We always have somebody that will say, you know what, I don't mind going home for a couple of weeks, because it's a really short-term thing. I don't think it's hard for me to just have people there if they're not busy. So, but we have with our technicians, we have different levels of guarantees that we've done with them, because we agree we might not need 3 technicians there, but we want to have at least one really good one there through April and have another one they're working back and forth. And so we have guaranteed them a certain number of hours that we know they're not going to hit, but that's where we're spending the money, is to keep the good technicians. And we've had a huge number of technicians in markets that are looking for work. You know, the dealerships have kind of just said, not all,
down, haven't they?
They kind of shut down. You know, that's a terrible model. And I hope that maybe something like this could make that model interesting. You know, something that I would be interested. I hate the dealership model because they always do that. They're the first to explode because they have too much debt and overhead. I think a small model. What if we could get Ford and Chevy and GM? I mean, Ford and GM to stop with the dealership repairs and certify shops to do the repairs. You could have a much smaller footprint. Anyway, that's a whole different.
I like that idea.
There's a lot of great things that we could do as a group where the dealerships are going to come limping out of this. A lot of them will file bankruptcy unless they get a bunch of free payments. Imagine you having $20 million worth of cars that every day is losing a little bit of value. So this goes on. If people don't start buying new cars, you know, your inventory is worth maybe 6, 7, 8% less. The closer you get to the end of the year, it's worth a lot less, but you're still making payments. It's tough, terrible. We're in the best business. Auto repair, independent auto repair is where you want to be.
Well, how are the conversations? How does it go? Like furloughing an employee, that's kind of like you're not firing them, right? You're just kind of not needing them. And is there legal paperwork? Do you have to have them fill out anything? And like, how do you say, well, we'll get back to you in a week or in a month? And I mean, is there a set time frame, or like what should owners consider on that?
So just remember, I'll let Sherri speak to this a little bit. Just remember that I think everyone, at least as of right now, I don't know everybody, but I think we asked for volunteers. And it's a very dangerous world out there. And Sherri can speak to the problems with just furloughing somebody that says, hey, I'm 65 years old and I want to go home. You could run, even though they're volunteering, it could be a real problem. And Sherri, you can speak to this a little bit.
Yeah, Tim, I was, as we had to come up with furlough kind of letters, what we did is we reached out to our HR advisor to make sure we were handling things the right way. And so what we came up with was we have a standard letter that we fill out in the case of reduction of hours for the employee, and we put a time frame of, like, you know, I think most of them have been May 1st is when we expect to either get back in touch with the employee or expect them to return by May 1st. So in the letter, we explain that this is a temporary situation for reduction of hours. And for the employees that we completely said, hey, we don't need you at all, that was specified in the letter the same way. And so along with that, what we did for helping the employee was just to provide them with their state's unemployment unemployment office information, so that they would know, especially in Georgia. Georgia was one of the states that required the employer to submit on behalf of the employee. So employees couldn't just go file on their own in Georgia. So just little things like that. If you research what your state requirements are, or provide the information to your employee, that's also helpful, because they could go and apply for unemployment during that time.
So if you're furloughed, you can get unemployment?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. They can apply for unemployment. And those, during this COVID crisis, those filings are not going to ding your employer unemployment insurance account.
Ah, good point. Good point.
So
So
that's
it's not going to impact you at all on that side.
no. And so another thing I would like to add to the furloughing issue of, and Greg mentioned it about the volunteer piece, what
Mhm.
we suggest is that if a general manager is wanting to furlough a few of one department, he doesn't suggest the volunteering, but if somebody just like speaks up and says, hey, if you're, going to be furloughing me or furloughing this department, I want to be a volunteer. In the case of a volunteer furlough, we have a separate form that we are asking the employee to sign because we don't want it to come back after this is all done and the employee has some kind of claim like, oh, I was chosen to furlough because I was over 65 or I was in ill health or whatever. So we just kind of covered our bases by having an extra form for the people that are voluntarily furloughing so that it was very clear. They still get the same furlough letters and everything, but we just have the one extra form that they
How's
acknowledge.
how does the benefits like the health insurance and all that work? Does that terminate the day they furlough as well? Do you maintain the health insurance or?
Yeah, so you maintain the health insurance and pay on the employee's behalf until their return. And then they would have, a catch-up period that we would, have a catch-up period for them to pay their employee portion.
Now, let's say you furloughed a guy till, April 30th, and then come May 1st, you're still not ready for them, and they need to stay gone another couple of weeks. Do you just do another letter kind of to extend it out?
You could do another letter, but it can also just be a verbal communication with them.
Now, if come the 30th, let's just say you've decided to go from furlough to just termination, do you because for whatever reason, maybe you're not able to open up the doors anymore, maybe, just things that happen in your business and you just are unable to really bring that person back, nothing that they did wrong. Is there additional paperwork you got to fill out? Do you then kind of go through a normal termination process or?
I would think that it'd be appropriate to probably speak to the individual and just let them know that their furlough is now a permanent termination because of business reasons. They actually would have their benefits through unemployment all the way to July 31st, I think is the additional federal $600 bump, that's until July 31st. But then after that, they would go just back to normal unemployment.
Okay, and then if they would, since you're covering the health insurance, the benefits, it would only flip over to COBRA if they were officially terminated, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Perfect. Very good. That's great information. I think we're going to have another slide later to talk a little bit about the PPP program coming up.
I'll be back.
Thank you very much.
Be back.
All right.
I was enjoying that.
Yeah, you got a little break. Hopefully you had some water, run around the cabin a little bit. Have one of those incredible stone fire pizzas that I used to have out there.
That's coming tonight. We're doing that tonight.
I'm gonna have to Facebook Live just so I can.
Facebook Live at 7 p.m. We'll be on there. We'll show people what to do.
What's funny is that we, for some of you guys that have been with Greg and Sherry and I for a while, we had our first mud stock at the ranch, and it was small enough. Actually, we had our first couple at the ranch, but it was small enough we could have pizzas. I remember cooking pizzas in that fire oven by the pool. So good memories.
I've gotten way better now, Tim.
Yeah, she's gotten it down pat.
Well, yeah,
so.
And of course, now there's, stay at home, so there's no invite. So I get it. I see how that works.
Well, we show people.
This is how good it could be. All right, we'll keep moving on, Sydney, to our next slide. We'll talk a little bit about, this is where we'll actually bring Sherry back in, and between you and her.
Good. Here you go, Sherry.
Maybe
this is the good stuff.
We may have to ask Greg for some help too. We'll see.
We can double team you guys. So talk a little bit about, I know a lot of folks, and like you guys, at the end of this webinar, I think when we send it out, we're going to try to also provide some links and all, but maybe some high level, because I know there's like a ton of questions. And for those of you guys on the call, if you guys have some questions, you want to type it up in that box, please do so. I'll try to cover what I can. Any questions I can't get to or too complicated, it's just something that's maybe a challenge on the webinar, we'll definitely reach out to Greg or Sherri afterwards and see if we can't get some clarification for you. But maybe some high level about this Paycheck Protection Program. What's that for, and who qualifies?
So most everyone by now, I think if you're a small business, you've heard of the PPP loan that is potentially a forgivable loan. And what it is there are qualifying expenses or qualifying wages that you use to calculate how much the loan amount would be. So our payroll provider actually created a report that we could generate for our businesses. And what it does is it takes all of 2019's wages and averages them out. So it's the full year wages divided by 12 times 2.5. The average monthly payroll times 2.5 is typically what the loan amount comes out to be. There's a lot of details within what's included in wages. And so you would just need to follow your, if you go on to SBA.gov, there's a lot of information about the Paycheck Protection Program, and you can see exactly what is allowed. And I brought what our bank actually required us to fill out just to show you an example.
Okay.
So it's like a borrower worksheet, and this was just specific from our bank.
Okay.
But I think most everyone's are going to be the same. So you would just complete it based on those guidelines, and they actually detail out for what has to be excluded. And what wages would be excluded is anything over $100,000 salaries in the year. And so those, you're capped at $100,000 for the salary people, even including bonus.
Let me ask you this. Is that Paycheck Protection Program, is that for people that are furloughed or people who were let go, or could it be for people who took a voluntary or involuntary pay cut?
No, what actually is encouraging business owners to use this loan program. And once you get the funds, the next 8-week period, you should spend 75% of the funds on wages. And the remaining 25% you can spend on other things like rent, utilities, interest payments on mortgages. There's a few other things that would qualify, but those are the main ones.
Okay, and you can get more information on that specifically. Now, does the employee responsible for kind of tracking it down and following the steps, or does a employer do it? Or, because it sounds like you guys made sure that they had kind of knew where to go, and then they kind of filled it out from there. Is that how it works?
That's actually so the unemployment piece is all on its own. Okay, so if you furlough someone and they are out, we've provided them just the information on how to apply for unemployment, basically.
Okay.
Those people have nothing to do, well, they kind of do, so just a second. You've laid people off because between now and when you can get the money, you have to run your business to where you are just bare bones, you've made cuts, you've done everything you can. But the purpose of the Paycheck Protection Program loan is that businesses can apply for it and get the money, but then as soon as they get the money, an 8-week clock starts ticking that you need to spend that money that the government gave you from this program. You have to spend it. 75% of those funds have to be applied towards wages. So they're encouraging you to bring back your employees that you had laid off between like now or a few weeks ago and when you get the loan.
Okay, so I get furloughed. I file for unemployment locally. I follow those rules, and I know the government's kicking in some extra money to try to help people out. As a business, I file for the Paycheck Protection Program.
Yes.
And that program allows me to get money from the government so that I can bring those furloughed employees back sooner than later to help me grow and run the business. Is that right?
Yes, that's right. And so the great part about the program is it's really helpful for businesses like ours that are still open, and we're trying to operate and keep some staff, and we actually are getting some revenue. So it's ideal for our industry to use this because it's literally they're paying for 8 weeks or 60 days of employee wages. It's getting given to us. So as a business owner, a small business owner, I would highly recommend you researching this program and applying for it if you haven't already. Some of the challenges have been, though, that the application process is a little bit different for each bank. There is a Paycheck Protection Program form that you can see all of the requirements for what they're going to ask for. It's a non-recourse loan. There's no personal guarantee. My bank is SunTrust or Truist now, and they actually have the application program online. So most all of the fields, though, that are on the form, the government form, ended up translating over into what SunTrust required.
Okay.
One thing that you do have to provide is payroll documentation. So those things like your quarterly 941s are for 2019, each quarter would be required as a document that they probably want you to upload. And some sort of calculation spreadsheet that showed how you came up with the figure of the loan you're asking for. And so, like I said earlier, our payroll program actually created a program or a report for all of us that use Paylocity, is who we use, to run those reports that give us the exact figures to help us calculate. And then
so you're kind of using your payroll company to help you kind of get the data, and you're using your bank, and between the two of them, helping you kind of get all the information you need to properly fill that out. Is it complex? I mean, is this a 15, 20 minute or 2 hours, 2 days? I mean,
if you have a good system of where you've kept your records for 2019 of your payroll quarterly returns, if you're a really small business and you only file annually, and that's called a 944, that's the only document that would be required. So lenders, the banks, are requiring at least, they don't have to go through every calculation, but they have to at least look at your 941s to verify that wages have been paid, all 4 quarters of 2019. So there are some, and you're signing off a lot of certifications that you really did have these expenses, and that you, to the best of your knowledge, calculated these things accurately.
so I had and that's, I think for people, I know guys that seems like really complicated, and Sherri did a really good job of simplifying that for us. I would encourage you guys to take some of the advice she said about working with whoever handles your payroll or your system, and working with your bank to get that information. Sherri, one of the questions that came out was, maybe we can try to help some folks out, is from John Hill, good old John from Auto Trends. Great to see you, John. If we terminate a staff member, we terminate staff, yet we rehire an equal number of people, do you know if that impacts that PPP eligibility? Meaning, it looks like maybe he had like two people left on their own. I'm sorry, one person left on their own, 2 were terminated for cause. And so they lost 3 people. He's going to hire 3 people. Do you know if he'd be eligible for PPP still, or is it only for people that they've had to furlough?
No, he's eligible to apply for the PPP. There's nothing stopping any of us as small business owners that have less than 500 employees. We can all file and request this loan. What comes into play is, even though your staff numbers or head counts have changed, you can still apply and get the loan. What those numbers end up meaning something to you is in the forgiveness piece of the loan. So at the time, after the 8 weeks, you have 60 days. Actually, the bank has 60 days to get back to you on the forgiveness piece. So you apply for forgiveness also after this is all over.
Absolutely. To get the free money, right?
Right. So that's when it's very the amount of forgiveness is dictated by full-time equivalents. Okay. So your full-time employee equivalents that you had before this disaster, and then what you did during by June 30th, you have to have your full-time equivalent number back.
Okay.
But the important piece to understand, I think, is on the loan itself. You can still get the loan, and if your business doesn't pick up like you thought, and you didn't hire everyone back, and you didn't get to use all the funds the way that you thought you could, you're going to get forgiven for a portion of it. So what is not forgiven is then transferred into the loan. So that becomes a loan, and that's on a 2-year term at 1%. That's right, 1%. So it's a great loan.
That's a good loan.
Non-recourse.
Yeah, and it's non-recourse. There's no personal guarantees. And so it's really just, if you're needing the funds to try and stay afloat, to pay your employees or the employees that you have, and you don't get back up to your full-time equivalent number, you still get a piece of it forgiven. And there's a forgiveness calculation that you'll see when you look into the program itself.
So one of the questions we had as well from Sandra Long, thank you, Sandra, talks about when we rehire an employee and repay them for that time that they were laid off, which I guess if you furloughed somebody, you're not paying them anyway. So there actually is no money. I think her question was, does this furlough and they're getting unemployment and then you rehire them back through this PPP program, is there any kind of refund that you have to do back to unemployment because they were drawing it, or?
No.
Okay.
No, there's nothing there. One other thing that I found out about fairly recently as another option for small businesses is the employer retention tax credit. So where that could also help is if you're in a time frame of paying wages for people before you get the PPP, you can take advantage of that. That's the employer retention tax credit. And what that does is, so if you paid somebody wages, and in our industry, we were still essential, so we stayed open, so we didn't qualify for like a government shutdown, and we still paid people, okay? We've still paid people, but our doors are open. But if your gross receipts are 50% less compared to the same period last year, you can qualify for any wages that you pay those employees during that, not during the PPP period, okay? You can't do both. Right. But you can actually get a tax credit for 50% of wages up to $10,000. So a $5,000 per employee tax credit you can take advantage of, and that's the max. 5,000.
And what was that called again?
That's the ERTC.
Write that down, guys. ERTC tax credit. that is something that you're going to want to use with your accountant at the end of the year, and make sure you keep good records. One of the questions as a follow-up
Just to clarify that, Tim, actually, you can get that now. So
Oh, okay.
if you're in business and you've suffered 50% reduction in sales this quarter, like the first quarter of 2020 compared to last year, the first quarter, if your sales were down 50%, all of the wages that you paid in the first quarter, you could qualify for the employee retention tax credit. And that is huge if your business has been impacted that heavily by a reduction of 50% over last year's first quarter.
Wow.
Our case has not happened. Because we went strong into the middle of March, for first quarter. But I just wanted to mention that as an option. But the benefit of that is you can fill out the tax credit form. It's form 7200, and apply for that credit, and they actually will mail you a check back, because you've been paying all along. If you've been paying your payroll taxes per payroll, then you will get a refund.
That's great. And one of the questions, and I know Sydney, you're listening on there, we're going to go well over 3 o'clock. So I just make sure that we don't lose track of the webinar here. One of the questions that she actually had too was a good question, I thought. When you get the payroll protection program, paycheck protection program, and you may not be able to pay that person their full wages. Maybe you're paying them 75% of their wages. At that point, are you kind of renegotiating with that employee and basically saying, hey, I followed this program, I'm not going to bring you back. I'm bringing you back, but am I bringing you back at full boat, or bringing you back based on kind of what the PPP will allow? And then when it gets better, then you go back to normal wages. Does that make sense?
Yeah, you can certainly do that. And because on the loan forgiveness piece, the wage reduction limitation is to get the full amount forgiven, you do have to pay your employees' wages at least 75% of what their wages were before the program.
Very good. I mean, we're getting a lot. I'll let you have one more question before I kind of inundate you here, because we could probably be here for a couple of hours. Let's see here. So one of the questions from Dale was, when getting the loan, do the employees still come to work even though there's no work to be done, or you just make up jobs? In other words, I think Greg made a point of this on a conversation I had earlier, where people are getting all this money, but people are still not coming in for service yet. So you could get this loan, get the money, and have the employee there. You're paying all or part of their salary, but yet there's really no work. Do you have them come in and just kind of do odd jobs? I mean, do they stay home basically, and you're just paying them while they're staying home? I know that's kind of a tough question there.
Well, and Tim, we're going through that now. So I think it makes sense. Think about it this way. You have here, I'll get you in here, Sherri. Smile. We're both in here. Wow, you look a lot younger than me. But anyway, so I don't think I would waste the money. And this is something that we've thought a lot about, which is, in other words, if you don't need a bunch of extra employees, then you can always keep that money. It won't be a grant, but what's the point of, if you get a grant that is just paying for employees that you don't need, you might need that money as a 1% loan. So you have to run the numbers. You're still going to get some of that loan as a grant, but maybe rather than waste a bunch of that money on employees so that you can get 100% grant, you might find that you really need that money in 2 months. So I would I'm thinking a blended version of that. I mean, people on this call will probably never get a chance again, other than this crisis, to get a 1% non-recourse loan. That didn't exist on planet Earth 3 weeks ago. Mm-hmm. For small business people, think about that. If inflation is 2%, which who knows now, that means it's basically a negative interest rate loan. So I wouldn't get hung up on it all being a grant.
So what I'm hearing is, guys, you should apply for the Paycheck Protection Program, get as much as you can, but be real strategic on when you bring people back. Worst case scenario is some of it's a grant, some of it is the lowest interest rate you're ever going to get to help you float your business a couple more weeks or months till you get back into that busy season. So it's another way to help kind of get your business back on track. Is that accurate?
That's
Yes.
accurate. And you can apply for the PPP loan all the way up until June 30th, if there's still money available. But it sounds like they may even do a second contribution to government money. So I'm not as worried about not being able to get the loan because of the funding getting all taken up right now. Because that's kind of what we've been dealing with, is we may not necessarily want the clock to start ticking if we got the loan next week. You know, that's when the clock starts ticking to spend the money on wages. 75% of the money needs to go towards wages in order to qualify for all of the forgiveness.
And you could put 100% towards wages, but you're only required to do 75%, right?
Right.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, that's a good point of clarification, guys, on the phone. Just to make sure I would write that part down. Go ahead.
Yeah, one thing they have said that if your bank gets the money now, you can delay when you accept the money. And that would really be smart, because in our business, I think we're going to see sales start to pick up first week of May, and it could take longer, but my guess is it'll start looking a lot stronger towards the end of May. And the reason why I say that is that none of the stimulus is out yet for people. So you got all these folks, people making under, 100,000 or a couple 150,000 that are going to get these checks. So they're going to get these stimulus checks. Plus you have unemployment kicking in with the federal government. None of that money's out there yet. And now we're an essential business. So they're not going to go to the movies. They're not going to a football game. They're not going to go out to eat, but they can fix their car. And that's an essential thing. So I can't imagine that people's sales don't go up dramatically. That's why I would be pushing hard to go full boat in May. It may be a little bit slow on the front end, but be ready to roll. That'll be our time.
And Sherri, is that correct when I say that PPP doesn't necessarily have to be used for a specific employee? I could have one employee that's furloughed, 2 people quit. So I lost 3 people. I hire 3 different people, but I still have lost wages and lost sales. And I can just apply that PPP just to be able to bring the same quantity of people back on board. It's not really assigned to a person. Is that correct?
That's how I've interpreted it. I would hate to say that, yes, that is exactly how it goes, because I mean, I have been reading that the wages are compared to what that employee's previous wages were. So if you did like a switch on a person, like you fired one service advisor, but you replaced him with another, I would assume that they would want those wages that the other guy had were comparable. That's my interpretation of it. You couldn't fire or get rid of the one guy and then bring somebody in his replacement for a lot less.
Yeah. So I think you be careful. If you have questions, make sure you seek, it's an attorney or your local agency, but really incredible information. I've got a couple follow-ups and I promise we'll move on. One of the questions was, does an employee have any recourse against you guys, employers, for not repaying those funds if they're not brought back to work during that in other words, if you furlough someone for 8 weeks, you take the money, it sounds like it's either going to become a grant or a loan, depending on how you use the money. If you furlough them, they don't come back, well, then it's a loan. If you furlough them and they come back, it's a grant or a percentage of it.
Yeah, and don't forget that the employee's not losing out. Because the federal government has come in and said, we're going to pay $600 a week, you could have employees that are making $12 or $13 an hour. They're making $400 with a 50% raise. while they're furloughed. Plus, they're getting a stimulus check. So this is not a bad deal for the employees that's been furloughed at all. It's going to be hard to get them back before I think this thing runs out at the end of July.
Time, right?
Yeah.
Quick question then. Go ahead.
I do want to add though that during the loan application process, your intention and the way that you answer the questions are pointed at you as, you know, you're requesting this loan to be able to keep employees. So
right.
I would hate to put myself out there and say, I intend fully to use all this money for wages, or 75% of the money for wages, take the loan and never hire anyone back and just like default on the loan or something. I just want you to, everyone needs to be careful what they are attesting to when you're applying and understand all of the rules.
Well, that's a good point. I think too on the call, I mean, the whole point is to try to get people employed. I do think it's a great strategy that Greg and Sherri shared about, you know, when you necessarily bring these folks back, just to be smart about it. So last couple quick questions. I knew this was going to be the biggest part once we added this slide, Greg. This is your fault. This is Greg's fault.
I know.
It's good.
So can the SBA or the PPP forgiveness loans, can any of that funds be used for marketing a business and then be forgiven? Or is only wages are forgiven, non-wages are a 1% loan, right?
But if you use 25% of the funds during that 8-week period, they can be used, you know, for rent, utilities, not marketing though.
Yeah.
You do have to show how you spent the money in that 8-week period.
Okay.
So it can be for those qualifying things. Now, the forgiveness piece is going to come into play if you didn't use it for, you know, those qualifying things or the correct percentages and keep the head count totals that would qualify you for full forgiveness.
So it sounds like it's important that you read the criteria of what you can do with this money and use it right, because it's not just a free for all.
Right.
You can't just take it and just use it how you want. Well, real quickly then, Sherri, is there any points on the other three, the economic injury disaster loan or the SBA express loan or the debt relief? Anything you want to touch on those three? Because I know the paycheck protection was the biggest one. Thoughts on these other three?
I would say now the economic injury disaster loan, that's truly a loan, but those have excellent terms also. They're over 10 years, right? 10 years, and maybe the max is 4%. They might even be better than that.
But you have to sign a personal guarantee.
Right, and you do the 10K advance piece. When you apply for the EIDL and while it's being determined, and you do apply for this directly at sba.gov. You apply through their website and you can request the 10K advance. That does become a grant even if you don't get the loan. But the thing with the 10K piece, and Greg had heard this morning or yesterday morning, and then I found it also, is that you only get advanced, not always the 10K, but it's based on per employee. So if you only have 5 employees, you're only going to get 5,000 advance.
So you go to the SBA site and you can get information on that one, correct?
Yes.
Yeah.
What about these other two? It sounds like I'm assuming both this express bridge loan and debt relief efforts, again, both at the SBA site. Any highlights on those that you think are noteworthy for these folks to know about?
I didn't do much research on either of the express bridge loan or the debt relief efforts, but just going back on one other thing that just came to my mind about the EIDL, for the people who have real estate businesses and don't have any employees, the EIDL is a great program for you. If you can say, if you need funds because you're not getting rent from your tenants, then you're a perfect candidate for the EIDL loan, because
Okay.
It doesn't require you to have employees, but the PPP does.
If it does. Okay. And then all these programs on here are all something that you can go onto the SBA.com, get information. Loans can be, are the loans all going through just you using a local bank and SunTrust? You could use any of your local banks, community banks, a lot of options.
The banks that are lending the PPP program, they have to already be an approved SBA 7A lender. I know
Okay.
that a lot of the bigger banks are being super careful about they're a little more concerned about people applying and they have to be a current customer, because there's of course going to be a lot of fraud involved in this stuff. And so that's why they came out originally saying, and still are saying this, you should go to your own bank that you have a relationship with, because they've already done all the verification piece on like know your customer.
Yeah.
So that'd be your best resource, is to go to your own bank that you already have a relationship with. And if they are an SBA lender, they are probably participating in the PPP program. So that's where you get that. Now, these other loans, the EIDL and these SBA Express Bridge loans, those I think are applied directly through SBA.gov.
Very good. Well, thank you so much for your time on that. We could probably spend another hour, but I appreciate your time. I have another question, Greg, that really quickly came up about very specific from Jeff Matt. He said, back to oil pricing, he said, what percentage of price drop were you able to get? His vendor is fishing to see what amount of a price drop his peers are receiving. So another negotiation tactic here, right?
Yeah, that's a good question. We actually have different prices in different markets. Like Houston's the lowest price out there, and I would be reluctant to say exactly what it is, but if you are over $5 a gallon, you're way out. You're way overpriced.
Definitely.
You should be able to do better than that. And I think, unfortunately, oil companies don't come to you and say, hey, our price for oil is half of what it used to be. You should be able to get a significant discount. All of you should.
Well, let's, guys, I hope you guys got a lot of that. This was going to be a meaty part of it that I appreciate Greg and Sherri spending some time on. We've got a couple more slides and then we'll open it up. Go ahead, Sydney, go on to the next slide here. And we're going to talk a little bit about something that you already talked about. How do I position my company for success? So now we're talking about marketing, and I get this question asked all the time. Do I actively market it? How much should I spend? One of the questions we had, Greg, I'll get to in a minute, talks about that. Do I go after new, existing? There's all kinds of different tactics: email, direct mail, social media, pay-per-click, SEO, all that stuff, guys. Whether you're using all that through us or you're doing all that through other vendors, all these are things that you guys should think about. One of the things that Greg and I've talked a lot about, those, when do you pivot? When do you start your traditional marketing program? And I think you kind of talked about that. So talk a little bit about like what you're doing for your marketing and maybe some ideas for these folks out there.
Well, we obviously pulled back some in April because we knew that the demand wasn't going to be there. But in May, our plan is to go back in full swing. I think most of the good operators, the bigger operators that I know, are looking at the same thing, probably not the national chains. But if you think about this, now I'm a big fan of direct mail. I use direct mail. And full disclosure, I was a founding partner of Mudlick Mail that was before Upswell, but I use Upswell. And, half the battle is making sure that who's reputable, and I love you guys. I love the employees there. The new owners are great people. They're good, honest people. So there's no reason not to use you. And plus, there's a lot of stuff that you guys put in place for who to mail to, in what areas. You guys are experts in the auto repair business. Not to give you an infomercial, but what I'm doing is I'm doing direct mail because guess what? All your customers are at home. I mean, we all look at the mail right now. There's never been a better time to do direct mail because we all look at it. Hell, I hadn't looked at my mail other than maybe once a week in a long time. Now I look at it every day. And there's very little mail in the mailbox. So if you look at strategically, I believe that we have an advantage with our companies by going full swing back into it in May, so that we're in the mailbox first, and that people will, as they get stimulus checks, which will start happening in the next week or two, I think we're going to get a better return than we've ever gotten. But I will tell you, one thing we've noticed, and this is one of our discussions we're going to have with our management team, is oil changes has always been, and I still think it's a good coupon, but that's not what people are coming in for right now. People aren't risking getting the coronavirus, because they want a discounted oil change. What they're wanting are repairs, which is what we've all dreamed about. So probably your ad should be directed more towards repairs and the way that you're keeping your customers safe. On your first slide or second slide about, that we'll come pick your car up and we'll sanitize it. We'll make sure that when you get it back, it's clean. That's a very important deal. If it's not in your ads for next month, you're probably missing it. People will want to fix their car more than just get an oil change. So I think the dynamic's going to change a little bit. And if you were looking for a new car, I bet you're thinking twice about maybe I'll just keep the one I got. So you're going to get an opportunity to invest. The other thing is you should have some type of financing that you can do, so that you're putting that on your direct mail piece. You should do some, although I'll be honest with you, I know you guys do it, but I'm not a huge fan of some of the online stuff. Not because I don't like it, it's just it doesn't get me the return. I mean, we track everything that we do, and over and over and over again. And by the way, I own part of an online company. I still own part of one, and I don't see the numbers now, but I see them internally. And still, I think anybody that does direct mail will, if they're being honest, they do direct mail, they're going to see it's the one that drives the cars in the shop. It just does, and until that changes, that's where I'm going to spend the bulk of my money.
Now, what do you think about customer callbacks at the shops too while things are slow?
It's been the only thing that has saved us many, many days, and especially on Saturdays. I mean, remember, every day could be a Saturday because people are working from home. But our Saturdays are still the biggest day for us. And sometimes at some of the stores, the only cars that we have in were from callbacks. And so it's imperative. Even if you didn't think about callbacks in terms of getting cars in the shop, why wouldn't you have these employees that are not that busy calling every customer in your database? Back in 1992, when I was looking for an industry to get into, this is exactly why I got into the automotive business. I was in the restaurant business. Thank God I'm not in the restaurant business right now. I'd be closed, or trying to do a little bit of delivery business. But what I loved about the automotive business is that, unlike most businesses, we know who our customer is. We got their name, their phone number, their email address. How do you not reach out to them? And they're available. So yeah. I would say, and especially if you're scared, if you're nervous, I've had this call with my friends in different industries. There's industries that are doing zero. Try the gambling, the casino business right now. They're making millions of dollars to zero. We're not in that position. You guys can really take this time to really perfect all the pieces that you want to do in your concept. If you bought probably 2 months ago, you're too busy to do callbacks. Today you got time. Make it an impact. You as an owner should call some of those customers yourself. I mean, there's probably customers that you've had for 10, 20 years. Just follow up with them, make sure they're okay. So it's vital.
And guys, there's some great ones, out there between warranty callbacks, people that have come in for major minor service callbacks, people that have oil change reminder callbacks. again, create, when I was working for Greg behind the counter, he's got all kinds of great, everybody's a VIP customer if they spend a certain amount of money. And it's a great way to bring people in. It's an inexpensive way to market your business. A lot of people don't like to do it, but I will tell you, it's nothing more pleasing than if you go on there not to sell somebody, but to thank them for their business and make sure that their service was taken care of okay. And by the way, we're willing to do this and this for you. I think you guys will understand that's the success that Greg's had across the country. One of the questions, Greg, on this before we move on to the last slide was, is there a percentage of gross revenue that should be spent on marketing? I don't know how you kind of calculate that. I guess what they're trying to find out is, you talked about, you've kind of shaved down some of your marketing for Q2. For Q3 and 4, or actually for part of Q2, how are you gonna adjust that for 3 and 4, and do you monitor it that way? And
no, so I have always, 20 plus years before we even created Mudlook Mail, I always had this theory of full market potential. So to me, I learned over years and years that most of my stores, there's some exceptions, but most of my stores pull 85% of their customers around a 2-mile radius around their store. So rather than me deciding what my sales are, by limiting who I mail to, I mail that 2-mile area, and that's my bread and butter. I mail 100% in the 1 mile. In the 2 mile, if I'm in a really dense area, like if I'm in more of a, not downtown area, but more of a inner city area where it's just too dense. So 2 miles is a long ways. Most of ours 2 miles is fine. We mail everybody that meets our qualification in that 2 miles, and then we mail them every month. I mean, from watching me, I've never not mailed. Even in April, we've still mailed some. This is the only month we said we're going to pull back. Well, we pulled back because we didn't know if we'd even be open. So in May, I anticipate us going back to normal, and then let us, by using our skills at the front counter, let's see what we can maximize. If we know we hit all of our customers in a 2-mile area, then I'm not limiting myself. And I learned that years ago. If you decide, well, I'm only going to hit 5,000 customers in a 2-mile area, and your full market potential is 10,000 customers, well, why wouldn't you mail the other 5,000 customers that lives close by your store? That's what people do. That doesn't make sense to me. You're better off to be blown out at the front counter and figure out how you're going to handle the business.
And one of the things I know, and we'll move on to the next slide, is that that pivot should probably from marketing is going to come sometime in May. Kind of watch the market, watch what's going on, and be prepared to move forward, right?
Well, it's a risk. It's something that I think makes sense. I know other people that I've talked to feel the same way. It doesn't mean I'm right, but logically, you think, gosh, a lot of people are going to get money, and there's not a lot of places to spend it other than online. And even then, maybe there's not a lot of deliveries going on. I think people are going to want to fix their car, and people have already figured out that staying at home sucks, man. After a week, you just want to get out. So there's going to be a way that we're going to have the economy open, and we're going to still have to be really careful so that we don't spread this virus. And that there's going to be a solution that comes out to that.
Yeah, and I've talked to a lot of customers about, you can get if you're depending on the marketing tactics you're using, but for the direct mail standpoint, it's putting together the ad and being ready, and maybe you print it, maybe you hold it. There's a lot of options there. The key is be ready, get a plan together, get postcards designed or whatever campaign you're doing, and be ready to move. And don't wait. I think one of the words you always told me is you want to be kind of right there before the dam breaks. You don't want to be downstream after the dam's already broken. So that you got to ride that. So
I think all of us have a chance to take away market share from other people, like dealerships and large chains that may not start their advertising back as soon. So it's a great opportunity.
Well, one of the questions I got that I can actually answer, shockingly, right, is putting ads together. George Hack, good to see you, George. I went by your shop, by the way, George, not but a few weeks ago. I almost stopped in, but we are putting ads together. Like as Greg mentioned, offering financing is a big option, a big deal. Almost every postcard going out should have some kind of a finance option. And then I know for Greg's postcards, as well as we've done it for hundreds of customers, there's a lot of good verbiage we have and use for concierge service, no contact payment process, curbside drop off, free pickup and delivery, a lot of great things that you guys can do. All right, so let's finish up on the last slide. Thank you very much, George. To the last slide here. This is what I thought was really important, Greg, is shop owner mindset, because man, it can just be numbing out there. You're getting so many people telling you different things, and you're listening to the media, and it can really jack you up in the head a little bit. And so one of the things you've always told me is, Tim, are you driving the business, or are you kind of that passenger observing the business? So maybe walk through, what do you think, how do we inspire, create a culture, kind of make sure you have a good outcome for your business? Because I think people really struggle sometimes. It's too much white noise out there.
Well, I think the first thing is that you have to decide how you're going to spend this time. We're going to all go through this together. Whether you like it or not, the next several weeks is going to be tough. You can spend that making your business better, helping your employees, maybe training them better, maybe painting your shop, try to up the curb appeal.
Mm-hmm.
It's the worst thing you can do is sit around and worry about your business. And so we always had a phrase that we use. You know, there's people that make things happen. There's people that watch things happen. And then there's people that just walk around going, what happened? And you want to be a make it happen person, to go, what are you doing? And part of it's webinars like this and other webinars. There's a lot of good industry guys out there that are giving back. That's really what Sherri and I wanted to do is, you know, this industry has done so much for us. We're so grateful for you and grateful for your for clients that we had when we were there. We're not an owner of Upswell, by the way, at all. So we have no financial gain in coming on here, other than we feel like we should give back where we can give back. And and I think that's something that you should decide to do too. If you have the means and you can help, and you own a shop, you should find a way to give back. But don't waste this opportunity. And I think that's the thing that we look at, Sherri and I, is that we put a plan together every day. She goes in her office. This is my office. My daughter's upstairs. My other daughter's upstairs. And we spend our day, for the most part, working and doing things or projects. But we don't turn on a television set. We don't want to listen to all that crap. You know, just, you know, you're in the greatest business out there. You know, be a leader. This is your chance to show that you're a leader. It's not you know, anybody can crawl under the desk in the fetal position. Everybody's going to be hurt. Everybody has some form of debt or problems. It's get off your ass and get back to doing what we do, which is we're entrepreneurs. We're shop owners. This is what we do. So that's what I do. That's what I would do. It's there's a lot to this. You gotta be focused.
No, and I appreciate that. And I think we've gone through that presentation. I think the next slide is simply questions, and we've answered a bunch. And I know people have kept you guys 21 minutes beyond our time. I do want to thank Greg and Sherri one more time for coming out, and you didn't have to do this. You know, they've been great partners. They've been out of the business now for a little over 2 years. You know, a lot of you guys know we bought them out, and Upswell's owned by some other folks now. So I just want to really thank you guys personally. I think it was important that we get on here and we share our knowledge. We're all trying to help the industry and to be better. So thank you guys for your time. I really appreciate it. Any parting thoughts here before we sign off?
Well, one thing we'd like to say, you know, this is actually a Holy Week. So we'd like to wish everyone a happy Passover and a happy Easter. We wish the best for everybody.
Very good. Thank you again, Sherri. Thank you so much for your time, guys. I appreciate it. I will send some follow-up emails to you guys. Some of you guys had a couple of questions at the last minute. We will get circled back to you on that. Greg, Sherri, have a wonderful rest of the week. Everybody, stay strong and take care, everybody.
Stay healthy.
Goodbye.
Thank
Bye-bye.
you. Bye-bye.